Totally recovered alcoholic. You know, I came into AA in 1990. I didn't get sober to 2007. Thank you, Everly, and thank you for the opportunity. But you know what? Let's get this party started right. Let me invite God into my square real quick. Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about these 12 steps, these 12 traditions, and these 12 concepts, and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and especially you, God, so I can have a new experience with all these things. Help me to see the truth. Please put the love in my heart and the words in my mouth. Amen. Woohoo! And yeah, and I love that the Bridge House is here. You know. I remember going to 9 of those places, guys. And the only thing I learned how to do in those places, I became a great ping pong player. I was the best in my ninth house. No one could beat me in ping pong. But in my first date, I got a great experience of playing ping pong. But those places are important. What they do is prepare me for the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. They get me separated from the alcohol and drugs. That's how I was a recovered alcoholic, and I love the smell of cocaine too. So yeah. My first introduction to the rehab was in 1990 to my job. They sent me away. And the only problem I had out with alcohol was that they had a problem with my alcoholism. And I went away to this place called, two traditions, I'm not going to say the name of the place, but it was upstate. And the nickname of it, they called it the farm. And I got a great education at that farm. I mere code of morals, better philosophy of life, but it's not sufficient to keep a real alcoholic of my type sober. When I get into my story, you're gonna probably be thinking, what's this hocus pocus he's talking about? Because that was me too. And I sat in those rooms, and I hear people talking about this power, this God, and I was like, oh, that's all hocus pocus. And you're right, it is hocus pocus. It's a magic that I can't explain. And I'll tell you right here, right now, I can't explain it, but I experienced it. And the only way I was able to experience it is by going to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, I love the topic that Everlay had gave me to talk about. It's talking about accumulation of things. That gives me this delusion that I'm doing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I came out of that rehab, and I did exactly what they told me to do. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. And I met a group of people. I formed a fellowship. And what happens is a guy like me who's new, I usually form fellowships with people who are just like me. Meaning, guys who are untreated. And we formed this crew. It was about 10 or 11 of us who were sober about the same time. Some guys in 1988, 89, 90, 91, 92. I give it a 5-year window. Who's never done the steps. And I get connected to these guys, and we're doing all the great things. You hear in AA and CA, take what you want and leave the rest sometimes. And I took what I wanted, and I definitely left the rest. And the things that I wanted was camaraderie. I had a bunch of guys who've been there, and I identified with them. Went to diners afterwards. We sat in diners, talked about everything but sobriety. We went to places together. We started forming this little group of poker players and talk about spiritual actions, right? We started playing poker, and we had a Friday night poker game every night, every Sunday. And we kind of put traditions on this. You had to have 90 days or $90 to get into our poker game, we used to say. And there was a whole bunch of untreated alcoholics playing poker. And what we didn't realize is that poker game was treating our alcoholism. Not God. You see, I fell under delusion by just a meeting attendance that I fell under delusion that meeting attendance was the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did that for years. And what I didn't realize is once I put down the drink, that's when the real problem starts for a real alcoholic. You see, because I see many people come into rooms of AA, not do the steps, and they come out and they're fine. They live wonderful lives. But that's not my truth. That's why if you're new here, I suggest you go into this book and from the doctor's opinion up to page 43 to get an informed first step. Something I've never gotten to my ninth and final rehab. I got a informed first step by a man who was carrying this big book, who went in there to save his own life. He wasn't there to save my life. He was there to save his own life. He had 30 years, 33 years sober, and he knew that the maintenance and growth of that spiritual experience that he had, the only way he was going to stay in that grace was by carrying this message to another drunk, and that drunk happened to be me. Thank God for that. I look back, we live life forward, we understand it backwards, and that's a cute way of saying hindsight's 2020, right? And I thank God for that, man. 55 people there, 55 people in this rehab, and he picks me. I know that's God today. Didn't know it then, but I know it now. Anyway, I'll get to him in a little bit. But I want to talk about this accumulation of stuff. So I come in and I accumulate a wife, I accumulate a house, I accumulate 2 brand new cars, I accumulate a good reputation at work. I'm doing everything, but human power does work. I tell you, human power works until it doesn't work. You see, I didn't realize that God had graced me way back in 1990. And now my job was to get connected to that grace. Guys, if you're sitting in that bridge house right now, they say in AA, don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens. The miracle's already happened. You're sitting there without booze or drugs in you. The miracle's already happened. But the thing is, I just had to get awake to that miracle. Just had to get awake to it. And how do I wake up to that miracle? It's through the first 9 steps. God does for me what I can't do for myself. Yes, that's the grace of a loving God. He separates me from booze, and he gets me a place of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now I need to do some work. Right? It's the maintenance and growth of that spiritual experience. I didn't realize that. I still had to get connected. I had to wake up. I had to wake up to that fact, and I never did. This is my experience. Not other people's experience, my experience. That's what's great about AA. We have 2 million people in AA. Everyone has a different experience. I don't speak for AA. I'm just a man who came into AA this time, November 27th of 2007, found a spiritual experience, and able to stay connected to that experience by helping others. Very simple. You hear, it's a simple program for complicated people. No, my sponsor told me it's a simple program for simple people who complicate the shit out of it. Simple program. So I'm accumulating stuff, I'm falling under the delusion that I'm doing the program of AA. And something happens about 5 years in. I started experiencing this thing called untreated alcoholism. Now, let me tell you about my first 5 years in AA. I was attending meetings. Back then, they had meeting list books. I don't know if you guys ever heard of meeting list books, but we had meeting list books. And I would look up meetings, and I would stay away from the big book meetings. I would stay away from the 12 and 12 meetings. I would stay away from tradition meetings because this was all literature-based meetings. And guess what? I had that self-centered fear that if you found me out, you see, I was living a double life in AA. I needed a certain reputation. Every time I got a new car, this was my reputation. I got a new car. I'm parking the car right in front of the entrance of it, so you could see my new car. It's all ego. I got this ego as big as freaking the Bronx, right? And I don't even realize it. But I need you to see my new car. I need you to see that I was attending meetings. I need you to see that, Doris there. Doris is in a meeting, right? Doris said some slick shit in a meeting, right? And I'll go, oh man, I gotta go share what Doris just shared in another meeting. I was a what they call a parrot. I would parrot what everyone else said, but not even understand it. Right? because there's this reputation. I need to give out this reputation that I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. The need to be important. And that's up there with the use of drugs and alcohol. That's right up there. The need to feel important. I need to be the center of attraction. And you know what? I find out in a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says it's the root of my problem, right? Pages 60 to 63. It talks about selfishness, self-centeredness. You know what? Let me crack this book open. Start reading from it. Selfishness and self-centeredness that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear. Self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So our troubles are basically our own making. They arise out of us, right? And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will right, though he usually doesn't think so. And I love that line, though he usually doesn't think so. That's telling me I'm delusional. And guess what? Everyone has self-will right. But I'm an extreme example of self-will right? I'm to the 10th power. I can't deal with resentment, anger, and feel like normal people. And that goes way back into my first step. I have an abnormal reaction to booze. We already know that through the allergy, right? Through the doctor's opinion. And I have an abnormal reaction to life without booze. Guys, what's the leading cause of relapse? I found this out. Leading cause of relapse is sobriety. Think about it. Sobriety is the leading cause of relapse, right? I'm stone cold sober when I pick up that drink. You see, I don't have a design for living for sober. Alcohol was my design for living for sober. Alcohol was a power greater than myself. But what's the problem? Alcohol's a human power, right? And what happens with a finite power hits a wall. It stops working. And that's what happened with me in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. No matter how much you could love me, my daughter loves me more than anyone in this fellowship. And I couldn't stay sober for my daughter. So that doesn't matter. So you take away alcohol from me, you taking away my friend. And that's why I don't demonize alcohol, because I had a love-hate relationship with alcohol. I loved it. I hated it. But I find out, that, I don't demonize alcohol. Why? Because it gets me to a place of surrender. It gets me to a place of desperation. It gets me to a place of hopelessness. And that's the only place I could make this plea out to this God that I don't even understand. Billy just scared me. Oh my God. Bill Swan, my boy. I love that guy. And it's only in that place. It's only in that place where I get to pull my head out of my ass. The big pop they talk about. It's only in that place where I get to a place that, I'm screwed. And that's the place I need to get in order to seek this power. God could and would if he wore socks. No? God could and would if he was sought, right? So I need to seek. So 5 years in, I'm experiencing this thing called untreated alcoholism. I don't even know what it is because I never read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what the hell I'm suffering from, right? I'm lying, cheating, and stealing. I'm accumulating stuff. I just said, I just accumulated a wife. I just accumulated a great job. Well, I had the job. I accumulate stuff. I buy stuff. I'm out here. On page 55, it tells me, I'm going to get there later, but on page 55, it tells me that where to find this power. And it says we were fooling ourselves. I'm just going to talk about that one line. We were fooling ourselves. That deep down in every man, woman, and child is this idea of God. I'm going to get there in a little bit, but what do they mean when we're fooling ourselves? This is my interpretation of that. This book is a book of spiritual codes, and once I read a line and I have this connection with these people who wrote this book, a spiritual code is released. And you know what that tells me? We were fooling ourselves. I suffer from an illness of delusion. I am so deluded, right? And self can't see self, right? I mean, I've tried. Self cannot see self. So I got all these things in my life. I'm coming to AA. I'm living the double life in AA. I'm lying, cheating, and stealing. I hear in AA, if you just didn't drink today, you're a winner. I didn't feel like a winner. I start getting sicker, sicker, and sicker. And what happens is, what happens is my human power ran out. I couldn't suck any more out of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous because that's what I did. Whenever I had a problem, I would come to AA and tell you guys about my problem. I was the capo of the misery mafia, right? What's the misery mafia? I got misery. I want to pull everyone into my misery, you know? I go to a meeting at Everlay, you know what this guy did to me at the other meeting, man? He did this, and that. I'm running around with resentments, and I want Everlay. I'm recruiting. I want recruiting for Team Tony, right? I want Everlay to be on my team, right? You know what he did to me? He did this, and that, and I hate me. You believe that? And Everlay, and when I was new, I used to fall for that all the time. I was like, oh man, what a scumbag that guy is. And I'll be on his team. And that's what I do when I come to AA back then. I'm recruiting. I'm recruiting so you guys get into my misery. I need a team. I need you to back me up. Meanwhile, I don't realize because I never read this book that my troubles are always of my own making. Resentment. I remember, when I was new in this program, and I would just go into the work, and I would come back with a new resentment every day to my sponsor. He goes, Tony, what are you doing? You going out there looking for resentments? Everything bothered me. I was like a sore thumb. Just touch. I was very sensitive, and alcoholics are sensitive. You 1 day or 30 years, they're very sensitive. My book tells me that it's a defect that we don't really overcome. So 5 years sober, my wife gives me an ultimatum, right? Because she finds out that I'm treating my alcoholism with gambling. She tells me, if you gamble one more time, I'm going to leave you. And at 8 years sober, I was still gambling. I just kept it away from her. At 8 years sober, I fall into a rut, and I owe the boys on Arthur Avenue. If you got anybody from New York knows the Arthur Avenue, you know what I'm talking about. The boys on Arthur, those guys. People you don't want to owe money to, put it that way. And they make a deal with me. They said, come up with half the money, and we call it settled. So I had to go to my job and get a loan for my pension. And what happened was, I'd forget that they sent statements to my house. And guess what? My ex-wife finds out. And guess what she did at 8 years sober? She did exactly what she said she was going to do. She left. You see? I started accumulating things. Guess what? When God takes them away, oh, wait, I shouldn't say that. When I give them away, like my friend MJ says, when I give them away, guess what? You're taking away my sobriety. You're taking away the reason why I'm staying sober. I'm under this delusion. I have this wonderful family, this wonderful house, and guess what? This just cracked it wide open. She leaves. She takes the furniture. Everything I accumulated starts going because everything that or everything that I accumulated is keeping me sober instead of God. I never woke up to the fact that God is wonderful, great. God's always been there, even before I came into AA. I just don't realize it. I just don't wake up to that. It happens in Bill's story on page 12. Bottom of the page, if you guys have your big book. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. Let me give you a little context about that. Bill W. is stuck in England. He's ready to go to France to go fight a war. And he starts bugging out because he just doesn't want to die, of course. Fear grips him. He goes to Manchester, England, right? He goes to the Winchester Cathedral, right? I don't know my geographics. I don't know if it's even there, but I talk shit and I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. But he goes to this place called this cathedral, right? He gets on his knees and he prays, and God comes. And I want to give you his experience out of his book because I get to relate with his experience with my experiences all the time. I had those foxhole prayers, and they're not really foxhole prayers. It's a it's an appeal, right? It's on page 55. It says that God is some part of my makeup, right? It's like an instinct, right? It's an instinct. Whenever I'm in trouble, I make this appeal to God, right? I don't even realize I'm doing it. If there's something out there, please help me. Right? Not a foxhole prayer. It's I'm making an appeal to God and I'm asking God to come in, but I just don't realize that's how delusional I am. The real significance of my experience in this cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a real humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by what? By worldly clamors, by my selfishness, my self-centeredness, my fear, right? Mostly those within myself. And so it had ever been since. How blind I've been. Going back to that page 55, we were fooling ourselves. You see, I'm out there, I'm grabbing and grabbing, I'm thinking these things out here are going to fix this inner condition I have called alcoholism. And thank God I had that experience. Why? Because I'm able to come here today and relate it. On page 124 of our big book, it says, and by the way, I don't have these marked off because they just come to me. Page 124 says, cling to the thought that in God's hands, my very dark past, right? My very dark 8 years of sobriety, right? 8 years of not doing the program, 8 years of lying, cheating, and stealing, and falling under the delusion that I was doing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is able to help somebody else today. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them. And I'm able to avert death and misery for me too, because I had that experience. I'm able to look back at that experience, having this experience today. Do I want to fall back into that experience while I'm in this experience today? You see, Billy Swan could tell me, "Hey, Tony, if you don't stay connected to this God, you're just gonna drink again." And Bill ain't lying. But the thing is, if I didn't have that experience, I have nothing to reference. Now I have something to reference. I heard my sponsor used to tell me, A smart man, learns from his experiences, right? But a genius learns from other people's experiences, right? So what the hell was I? Okay. Yeah. So I'm living the double life in AA, and guess what? I lose the house. I lose the wife. I almost lost my job. 8 years sober. This book talks about the number one offender for the alcoholics is resentment. I still had a resentment against my wife. Guess what? 8 years sober, I get this great thought, and I'm gonna read page 66 of our big book, and this is exactly what happens to me, untreated, without a solution to alcoholism. Right? Here we go, page 66. It says it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. It doesn't not only kills me physically, it murders me spiritually. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit, and the insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. That's exactly what happened to me. And with us, to drink is to die. And that would be cool if I died, right? I'm not scared of dying when I'm drinking. I don't give a shit about dying. It's living that's the problem. The misery, the rebuke, the, the insanity of looking for the next one. That's the problem I don't want to live with. If I died, that's cool. I'll be gone. So I go on another run. But before I tell you, I had a 38 in my mouth ready to blow my brains out. Thank God alcohol shows up in my life again. Alcohol saves my life. That's why I don't demonize alcohol. Alcohol saved my life. It worked when I needed it to work. It came back into my life. But here we go. On page 30 of our book, it tells me something that I did not know. Over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. Got worse. So now I'm starting to be that guy in and out, in and out. I'm coming into AA, it's not working. You see, the power, the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous has power, but it's not sufficient at this point. Because what? And there's a chapter 2 wives in our big book, and it talks about the 4 husbands. Guys, I came in here husband number 2, and I graduated to a husband number 4 without even picking up a drink. 8 years of sobriety, 8 years of being untreated. Not only does the physical get worse, but the mental gets worse and the malady gets worse. Not only was I accumulating things here, I was accumulating things to block me off to this power. I was accumulating resentments. Number 1 offender. So I'm coming in and out, and I'll save you all the drama. I don't talk about war stories, really. Because my war stories ain't gonna keep me sober. What makes me think my war story is gonna keep you sober? That just doesn't work. Can't scare an alcoholic. Fast forward, November 27th, 2007. I'm in and out, in and out. I start accumulating things. I start accumulating rehabs. I start accumulating enemies. I start accumulating debts. I start accumulating things I have to make amends for. I'm accumulating stuff. And I show up busted, disgusted, and can't be trusted. I love that when they say that. I'm on the bridge of George Washington Bridge. I'm ready to jump off, and there was this guy who always called me whether I was in AA, out of AA, and later on, this man is going to be my sponsor. He becomes my sponsor, and I call that man at 4:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, and he'd be an old timer at the time, 33 years sober. He picks up the phone. He has caller ID. He goes, Tony, it's a Wednesday morning on 4:30 in the morning. He tells me, I'm getting a call from you. Life must be great, he says, as he picks up the phone. I start laughing. He starts laughing. And he just diffuses the whole situation. And guess what this man does, guys? He didn't say, hey, kid, you're drinking. I don't talk to drunks. I don't talk to drunks. If you're drinking, don't call me. No, he doesn't say that. He doesn't, hey, kid, you might get me drunk before I get you sober. So, don't call me. No, he didn't say that, right? Some of the shit you hear in AA. I'm sorry. The man said, come over to my house. I'll put a pot of coffee on. That's what the man said. Think about it. He's inviting a drunk at 4:30 in the morning to his house. Why? Because he knew what the hand of AA meant. He knew that responsibility statement. He was a card-carrying member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I show up to that man's house and we start looking for rehabs because he convinces me. And at this point, I was willing to do anything. Remember that gift of desperation? I was willing to do anything. And that's when God started connecting the dots. God started connecting the dots when I was on the bridge. That was a spiritual experience in itself because I still drive by that bridge and that exact same spot. I've been in traffic and I pull out my cell phone and it says no service. To this day, I still do that and it still comes up no service. Whew. So I go away to my 9th and final rehab. I do a 7-day detox, and now comes the guy with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He gives me my first step. He gives me alcoholism in a book with his experience. I did not know I suffered from an allergy. He goes, Tony, and this is how he approached me. He approached me. I didn't go to him. I want nothing to do with it. Guys carrying a big book? Hell no. I want nothing to do with that. That was my contempt prior to investigation. If you were carrying a big book in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would run away from you. It was like sprinkling holy water on the devil. I would run. It's my contempt prior to investigation because my ego doesn't want to get better, baby. My ego wants to run my life. My ego wants to live and breathe. It wants to run my life until I die. He's showing up with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he sits there. He goes, Tony, by me telling you my story, I get to stay sober today. And he cracks this big book open to this place, in the doctor's opinion. He goes, I got a thing called a physical allergy. And this is what happens to me. And he reads it out of the book. We believe and so suggested years ago that the action on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. I have this allergy, Tony. Because the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. He goes, I found out that I don't drink normally. I'm an abnormal drinker, he tells me. I don't drink like other people. I was under that delusion, Tony. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things, the problems pile up on them and they become understandably difficult to solve. That happened to me. Does that happen with you? And this is the first time, I think, in my life that I was honest. I said, yes, it's good. Me too. You see, the man was speaking the language of the heart. The heart of him was touching the heart of me, or the God of him was touching the God of me. He was qualifying me as a drunk. And he wasn't qualifying me so, for his purpose. He was qualifying me for my purpose. and something happens. This thing called the phenomenon of identification. I needed to know what the problem was before I went to the solution. If you read page 180 of our big book, you see when Dr. Bob meets Bill. You know, Dr. Bob shows up to Bill W., right? Dr. Bob is like, listen, bro, ain't nothing you could do for me. I've been pushed, prodded, stuck with, it says seances over me. I've had doctors all over the world send me books on alcoholism. There's nothing you could tell me that can help me. You know what Bill turns around and tells him? Papa, I'm not here for you. I'm here for me. Bill was from the Bronx. He talked like that. He says, I'm here for me. And they sat down, and Bill gave Dr. Bob the problem. And guess what? Dr. Bob goes out. You see, Dr. Bob had this very, very means of a spiritual program just like us. But faith is insufficient without works. He goes out and he works with 5,000 drunks in 15 years, never to drink again, to his death, 1950, I think it was. Because he knew the problem. He knew what he suffered from. He knew, lack of power was his dilemma, and the only way he could access this power was by helping others. He knew that. So as he said with me, he goes, yeah, I got this thing called the mental obsession, right? And you might have this, but I'm just going to explain. And he says, and he read it from the book. He says, it's a thought that's so strong, right? It's a thought that's so strong it makes me believe a lie. It's a thought that overrides every other thought. And I'm shaking my head like this. I'm identifying with him. Yeah, me too. And the thought is that it's going to be different this time. And he goes, I drink for the effect produced by alcohol. And then he reads it from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says men and women drink essentially because they love the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it's injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the normal one. And I identify with that. I'm sitting in a house my last couple of days before, I come into AA. My house is a mess. I haven't cleaned clothes. I just buy new ones. Buy new underwear. I buy like 150 pairs of underwear. I know, I have like my house is like it's a dumpster. It's a Bowery, my house. It's a Bowery. Cans all over, bottles all over. But I think this is normal. See, I can't tell the truth from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the normal. They are restless, irritable, and discontent. And again, unless they experience a sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. Right? And let's talk about that restless, irritable, and discontent. Right? I want to go to page 151 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I say, yes, I'm shaking my head, by the way. I'm identifying with this. And he gives me my first step in a nutshell. Right? I'm the kid. Now and then a serious drinker, right? Being dry at the moment. I don't miss it at all. Feel better. Work better. Having a better time. As an ex-problem drinker, I could smile at such a Saturday. But our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark. I was the boy whistling in the dark back in 1998 when I picked up that drink. To keep up my spirits, he fools himself. Inwardly, he would give him anything to have a half a dozen of drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game, for he is not happy about my sobriety. Remember, number one cause of relapse? Sobriety. I don't have a design for living for sobriety. That's me, dry. But I can't get to the power. Why? Because I'm blocked off. And this is the next part I'm talking about. I'm blocked off by this thing called the spirituality. It says in our big book on one page, once the spirituality is overcome, I strengthen now mentally and physically. How do I overcome that? Through the first 9 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the recipe to remove that spirituality. I can't work on myself, guys. I can't go to therapists. I've been there. Can't go to psychiatrists. I've been there. No human power is able to do that for me. The only power that could do that is me sitting across from another man doing a fifth step and have God come into me and remove these things from me in 6 and 7. That's the only way. Something, and that's that hocus pocus I was talking about, that magical thing that I cannot explain, but I've done. So it gives me my first step. I come back to New York. And I called that guy Steve. I said, Steve, would you take me to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous? He goes, oh my God, what did they do to you? They perform an exorcism down there. What's going on? I'm like, oh shit. And we start going to this Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had my first step in place, but still not good enough because self-knowledge doesn't fix it. We get to the point in the second step, right? He goes, is God everything or is nothing? And I go, Steve, all due respect, that's a bit much. Bit much. And he closes the book. He goes, you know what I want you to do? And he was a smart man. I already joined a group. They meet 5 days a week. I had no job. They gave me the key to the, and that's why I'm that gone prospector on page 128, right? I'm picking away. And that's why it's so important. And I stress this to join an in-person meeting. And this is only because I've had this experience. I joined this in-person meeting. I become part of a group. I become part of the traditions. I become part of a group conscience. I start doing commitments for this group. I start making coffee. Those little things are little spiritual experiences that I don't even realize till I'm way down the road of recovery. And I get to look back at this. And I get to see how God was working in my life. Those things were the little spikes, I'm picking away until my pick strikes gold. And a guy comes in, he goes, well, I want you to go back. And he gave me 2 assignments. Help somebody and don't talk about yourself so much when you meet somebody. Ask them about them. That was a hard one to do. I love to talk about myself, I would talk about myself. So I'll be like looking at somebody and they're talking. I say, I wish you finished the sentence so I could start talking about me. And sometimes I just start talking about me even before they finish the sentence, right? Guy comes in, and you can't make this stuff up, man. Guy comes in, God sends this man. I see it today. God said, guy off the streets, homeless guy. Goes, Tone, he doesn't know my name, for him to say Tone. But he comes in and he sits down and he goes, could you do me a favor? My feet are really bad. He had really bad feet, from being homeless and stuff. He goes, I need to get to the soup kitchen. Could you take me? I said, yeah, no problem. I will. And I took him to the soup kitchen after the meeting was closed. And he shows up the next day. And the next day, now he brings his friend. I got 2 guys showing up, and I'm taking him to the soup kitchen, right? About 2 or 3 weeks in, I don't remember. I'm sitting down and I have what I like to call a white light experience. I get this unbelievable feeling of gratitude. That's all. Gratitude. It came from inside. I felt that. I felt it. I started bawling and bawling. I couldn't stop crying. My sponsor called it weeping. And I called my sponsor up. He goes, you tapped into the power. Is God everything or is nothing? He says, that's that God that I was talking about. That feeling of love. That man was smart. He knew at that point my ego was cracked wide open. I was willing to do anything. He goes, Tony, that one, and he warned me that one spiritual experience will not keep you sober. It's the maintenance and growth of that spiritual experience is the start. Let's proceed on with the rest of the steps. And we did a 3rd step prayer that was powerful. And I did a 3rd step prayer with a priest too. And it's not a religious program, guys. I'm not a religious guy, trust me. But I did a 3rd step prayer with a priest because my big book says, I also have to do, if I'm connected to a religious denomination, I also have to do a fifth step with a priest. And if, you know, it's just as a must, it says in the book. So don't argue with me, argue with the book. Anyway, so we go on and we do a fourth and a fifth step. I show up with the best fourth step I could at that time, but I still have the untreated mind, right? And we sit down and we discuss this. And it's the first time in my life that I experienced this thing called humility. For the first time in my life, I get to see where I was wrong in certain situations because I could never see it. It says in our book that as far as I got to see where others were wrong. First time, something happens within me. This ego's cracked a little wide open, a little bit more. Right? That sick man prayer. I must have done so many sick man prayers, it's ridiculous. And in actuality, the sick man is me, bottom line. And not only that, anyone who's connected to me is probably sick too. Because why? Because I made them that way. If you go to page 122 of our big book, it tells me that, right? Man, God's sending me all these text messages here. It's a sensation of drinking is but the first step away from a highly strained abnormal condition. A doctor said to us, years of living with an alcoholic is almost sure to make any wife or child neurotic. The entire family is, to some extent, ill. Anyone who's connected to me gets sick. You see, in that fifth step, I get to see that. I get to see how I make them sick. How? By the things I've done to them, the harms I've done to them. You know, my my daughter in the third grade, I make her a liar because every weekend that daddy's supposed to show up, she would show up on Monday and tell everyone daddy showed up. And meanwhile, I didn't show up. Right? How do I find that out? When I go out and make amends? I find that in my little daughter gets to experience alcoholism. She doesn't even pick up a drink. I get to see how my mother and father get to experience alcoholism and they didn't even pick up a drink. One of the most powerful amends I made to my grandmother. And she was on her dying bed. She was 101 years old. And we call it collateral damage because I hurt her daughter, which is my mother. I went and make amends to her. And she goes, Anthony. She calls me Anthony. Family calls me Anthony. Every night I prayed for you. And I thank you for telling me this. Because now I could die. She knew she was dying. She goes, I could die a free woman. Because I knew God would never let God would never let me down. Thank you for telling me this. And she goes, she's telling me it all in Spanish. I just want you to do me one promise that you never hurt your mother and father again. That's the power of alcoholism. So I got many of men's like that just powerful. So I find out, in that fifth step, how I harm others. I get to 6 and 7. I read out the book. What page is 6 and 7? 76, I think. This is the opposite. I remember this. Yeah, here we go. If we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable, we are now ready to let God remove from us all these things which are immediately objectable. How do I have these character defects? My sponsor was writing them down while we were doing the fifth step. Can he now take them all, everyone? Yes. Real quick, yes. Every single one. If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. And by the way, when I did a fifth step, I did 5, 6, 7, and I was out the door with my 8-step list the same day. When we sat down, my sponsor said, "This is not therapy. We're not going to have a 14, 15-hour freaking fifth step. The most you got me for is 3 hours." So, and thank God he did that because it was like the domino effect. That's how it hit me. When ready, we say something like this: "My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to my fellows." And that's why I put that list of character defects. And not only did I do that, I asked God to give me the strength, inspiration, and direction to do the opposite. Grant me strength as I go from here to do your bidding. Amen. Done. Done. I have my 8-step list. I'm out the door. He says, if you want to do a perfect 6 and 7, this is what he told me, and this is just my experience. The book doesn't say this. This is what he told me. You go out and make all your amends in step 9. That's what he told me. That's your corrective measures, Tony. And that's what I did. I got 4 minutes and 38 seconds. So I remember finishing all my amends, and I had some powerful amends. I had some crazy ones, you know. And all of us have those stories. 9 out of 10, the unexpected happens, and it's so true because I put expectations on everything, even my amends. And when I showed up, my expectations was totally wrong. Right? That's what I'm talking about. 9 out of 10, the unexpected happens, and that was the unexpected. I told probably the opposite of what I expected. Anyway, so I go to the first 9 steps. I start thinking differently. I'm working with others like a fiend. I'm walking around with this big book like a psychopath. I'm going to meetings. I'm carrying the message, you know. And then, steps 10, 11, and 12. That's the maintenance. That's the most important part of my recovery today. Is these things on page 85. These promises. I don't have enough time to read the whole 10-step promises, but it says this is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And how do I stay in fit spiritual condition? You see, the first 11 steps are all prepared so I could help others. It says, on page 77, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and others. In that third step, I made a commitment to God. Right? God, you take away my difficulties, I'm your worker, send me out, help others, as long as I go help your children. And my earbud just died. Could you guys hear me? Okay, cool. Thank God I only have 4 minutes left. I think Everlay's been adding minutes. Because I looked about 2 minutes ago and it was 4 minutes. I love you, Everlay. Thank you. I got you. So steps 10 and 11, and they're just purposes to keep me on my real purpose. That's to practice these principles in all my affairs. God doesn't render me white as snow, right? God gives me opportunities to practice the opposite of my defects, but I have to be awake to those opportunities. I have to see that out in the world. Right? That's why I practice these principles in all my affairs, so I could work the opposite of these defects. Sometimes I'm not being quite loving and tolerant, right, with people, and what happens is in that 10 step, he gives me this thing called a vital sixth sense. You see, in my 5th step, I get to see where my 5 senses just ruined my life. Now he has this thing, this 6th sense, the spiritual sense, this connection to me and him. And when I'm doing something wrong, the alarm goes off. Thank God for that. It's called a belly barometer. Most people call it. And the 11th step is the things I do at night in the morning to stay connected to this power. You see, and I'll shut up with this. You know, I got 3 minutes to talk about this grace that separated me from booze. All these 12 steps are to keep me connected to this wonderful, wonderful gift God has given me. But there's a price that has to be paid. Right? It's a gift. Like I said, God does for me what I can't do for myself, but there's another side for that. God doesn't do for me what I can do for myself. And what that thing is, it isn't that I go to Salvation Armies and rehabs and carry this message, right? It isn't that he gives me grace. Those things keep me from my default. What's my default? That I'm selfish and I'm self-centered, right? Keeps me from that. Because I do those things, it keeps me from falling back to selfishness, dishonesty, being resentful, and being fearful. Right? As long as I stay spiritually fit. See, God never takes the grace away. I do. If I stop working and stop doing what he wants me to do, to stop playing the role that he assigns for me. And when I stop those things, I revert right back to that self-centeredness, and I end up on page 66. I stop doing this. I guarantee you I will drink again. You know, it's not an overnight matter. It's going to continue for a lifetime. Got a minute 42. So if you're new or just coming back, sit back, relax. The war's over, guys. Stick and stay. We need you. We need you to get on the firing line of life, right? If you want to get hit by a spiritual bullet, baby, get on the firing line of life. And what does that mean? And I'll read it from page 102. It's one of the most wonderful promises of this book. Your job. I was like, what's my job, sponsor? He goes, Tony, your job now is to be at a place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. Hasn't lied to me yet, baby. Hasn't lied to me yet. You know. And I'll finish with this. I got 40 something seconds, 38 seconds. If you want to find the truth about yourself and your alcoholism, the 12 steps is the introduction to truth. Get connected to the 12 steps and you'll find out a whole lot about yourself. You know, that's been my experience. And it connects you to this power, this grace that's, you're sitting in that rehab right now without a drug or alcohol in you. Man, you are so lucky. You are so grace. Like my sponsor said, get busy living or you're going to get busy dying. What's your choice to be? That's all I got.